The Friendly Neighborhood History Channel for our weekend Q&A, first part, and our first Q&A in our new studio and our new location. As many of you may know, we were forced to relocate, and that's okay because we've got a new studio up and running and the Wi-Fi is up and running, so the issues with the issues with the Wi-Fi are a lot better now. We're not having as much buffering, hopefully, and hopefully we have a really good session where you get to ask me all sorts of things about history, questions, Q&As that you have. You can ask me anything about social studies, past and present, history, geopolitics, social sciences, humanities. That's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. That's what we're all about, and we will be bringing you history for the next hour or so. And if you like learning about history, consider subscribing to the channel. You are in the right place. You've come to the right place to start off your weekend, hopefully on the right foot, learning about history, asking about history, bringing up comments or topics you want to talk about. That's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Fridays and Saturdays in the early evenings, we get you guys started for your weekends on Friday, and we keep our weekends going. Before you go out and party on Friday and Saturday nights, come and learn some history and ask about some history. It's what we do here. It's what we love to do here. And we love everybody who likes and subscribes. Becoming a friendly neighborhood historian is as easy as liking and subscribing to the channel. And that's what yeah, so that's what we're about. We do our live stream Q&As. And this weekend, for the first time ever, because it's a 3-day weekend, we are doing a special of not one, not two, not three, but 4 live streams. We've been doing the 3 live stream thing for a few months now. We've added the live stream lecture on Sunday. We'll be talking about the English Civil War. Really excited. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern, by the way. But Monday, we're doing a special live stream lecture about the legacy of Dr. King. I will be doing a long form video about that. I've already done a short form video about his life that came out yesterday, or 2 days ago, because that was his official birthday. That's why MLK Day is the 3rd Monday in January, because it's close to January 15th, his birthday. But yeah, celebrating the life and legacy and importance of Dr. Martin Luther King is something big here on the channel. And so I will be doing a special live stream lecture on that. So I've got 2 4 weekend lives, 2 Q&As, the first one tonight, the next one tomorrow night, then 2 live stream lectures on Sunday afternoon and Monday afternoon. So really join us for that, and consider liking and subscribing and joining the Friendly Neighborhood Historians. We are over a legion strong, 6,000, and the goal is, I think, 10,000 by the end of this year, maybe. That'd be really amazing if we could get there, but the sooner the better. We are growing in influence, and we have social medias. We have Instagram and Facebook and all sorts of places you can follow us there. We also have a Patreon and Substack for friendly, it's usually friendly history, friendly neighborhood history. Those underscores usually work, and that's where you can see, if you don't like listening to my voice, maybe you can read some of my writing, some of my comments and reflections on history from there. And then on Patreon, there's exclusive content that you won't get anywhere else but on my Patreon. So consider subscribing to there. You can become a free member, and there's some stuff there, but there's even more exclusive content if you want to be a friendly historian or a best friend historian on my Patreon and become one of my Patreonies, such as Rich Contreras, M.A., Henry Wright, Simon the Bunny, and Ballet Peace, some of my favorite people and some of my the cornerstones of this channel. And we've got my wonderful moderators like Simon and Rodolfo and Matt. Really appreciate all of their help and everything. So hello, welcome, thank you for joining. And yes, I Love Music is a proud paid subscriber, and we're happy to have them along for the ride, and that's on Patreon, so you get more exclusive content there. I don't upload all the time there. I've been obviously dealing with a lot, having to change places and a forced relocation in the last week. It's been really difficult, but you guys have kept me going. This channel has kept me going because we get to talk about history, and that's something I love. So whenever you're going through a hard time, hold on to what you love, and in my case, it's holding on to history, it's holding on to this channel, it's holding on to the Q&As and everybody that joins us for them. So hello and welcome. Cameron, Nessa, great to see you. Thank you for joining the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel on our weekend live Q&A Ask Me Anything Part 1. Part 2 will be tomorrow. And then we've got back-to-back live stream lectures Sunday and Monday. So for the first time ever, there are 4 live stream lectures. And we will also have a bunch of other stuff to get into on the channel. So this is what we do. This is what we're all about. Presenting history in a friendly neighborhood manner, so that you can hopefully enjoy it and learn something you haven't learned before. And I'm always learning from the channel because people are always bringing up stuff that I wasn't aware of or didn't know about. And that helps the channel grow, and it helps me grow. Yeah, so please consider liking and subscribing and all of that great stuff. So, and if you would like to, you can drop in any comment, question, or topic you'd like to discuss. We don't have the lighting quite figured out here at the new studio. We're going to figure that out in the next couple of days, hopefully by tomorrow. And there's also my microphones that are being replaced. I lost a lot of those when I had to relocate. So a lot going on, but we're doing our best and we're moving forward. And that's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We move forward just like history. I Love Music is saying, I enjoyed the language topic, never knew that Greek was the oldest language, things you learn in the neighborhood. Well, yeah, it's not the oldest language ever. I mean, there are languages that are not used anymore that are older, but Greek is the oldest written language that we still continually and consistently use. The ancient Greek language, Koine Greek, is obviously the lingua franca of the Roman Empire. The New Testament of the Bible is written in that language. The Septuagint translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish scriptures are written in that language. So you've got evolutions of language and the developments of language, just like with English and any others, but Greek is technically the oldest that is still extant and used popularly, that has not become, quote unquote, a dead language. Now, dead languages are always telling us things, Latin, Sanskrit, things like that, but there are languages that are older than Greek, but they are not used anymore, at least not used commonly, and those who learn them more esoterically and more for fields of study and things like that. So absolutely, I'm so glad that you were able to learn that, and you were able to learn that I Love Music on the Patreon where you've joined, and that was really, really, really helpful. So, anyways, yeah, so if you have a topic or a question or a comment about history or social studies, geopolitics, past and present, the humanities, that's what we do here. That's what we're all about here. So drop it in the chat, and I will be happy to oblige, and we will be answering your questions, inquiries, topics, questions, comments, concerns for the next hour or so, because that's what we do here. So let it rip whenever you'd like. I'm right here for you. And again, we're going to get the lighting and microphone thing worked out in the next few days. Let me see. So we've got that coming along slowly but surely. Do you like crab cakes? Well, that's not necessarily a historical topic, but yes, crab cakes are delicious. I'm a seafood kind of guy. I enjoy eating different kinds of seafood. Oysters are usually my favorite, shrimp, stuff like that. But crab cakes are enjoyable. I've never made them. I love to cook. That's one of my side hobbies. Obviously, the history is my biggest hobby, but one of my side hobbies is cooking, and I've never cooked crab cakes. I guess you bake them. They would be a lot of fun to make, and I'd love to make them someday. But yeah, do you like crab cakes, Pickles? And that was a good, nice, soft question to open up the Q&A, but you can ask me about anything social studies related, history related. That's what we do here. That's what we're all about here on the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Of course, we've been forced to relocate. I'm not my usual surroundings. For those of you who are joining us just now, it's been a difficult stretch the last week and a half, but we are hanging on in there, and the channel is still there for you to communicate as much historical knowledge and information as needed. So you can't stop thinking about them? Yeah, they are that good. They're very good. I mean, you can put tartar sauce on them. You can put cocktail sauce on them. They're pretty adaptive too. So definitely a whole balanced meal there. Yeah. So we actually had kind of an on-time start for once. Usually we don't start until like 5:10, 5:15 because I'm running around doing all sorts of things. But we started at about 8:03, 7:03, depending on where you are. I don't like to be specific about where I am and everything, but wherever I am, you are part of the Friendly Neighborhood, and you are part of our Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So thank you for joining us for the first part of our two-part weekend Q&A. We do this every Friday and Saturday night, where you can ask as many questions about history and social study as your heart's content, and I will answer them as best as I can. And if I don't know something, I'll say it, because I'm always learning things from you guys, because you bring up stuff I've never heard of before. I've learned about a bunch of different things. I didn't know that there was a Unit 731 before the live streams. I didn't know that there was an Operation Able Danger. I didn't know that there was about the USS Liberty and all of these things, and the Levon incident. So I'm always learning from you guys, and hopefully you guys are learning from me. Melissa, I'm yapping about history, social studies. That's what we do here on the channel. So if you are interested in history or social studies, Melissa, please ask a topic or a question, bring up a topic or a question that you find interesting. It's good. I mean, mac and cheese is one of my favorite dishes, so there's that. I typically don't give out a lot of personal information. I try to be as anonymous as possible. My moderators don't even know my name, but they do know how much I love history, but they also know, but I mean, talking about food and things that I enjoy, like cooking. I mean, you guys can see my face and what I look like, so you've got that. Meatball casserole. Never had that. Is that good? I'd have to try it. I'm not sure. Yeah. Hopefully the audio and visual quality, which you've been struggling with a lot, is better today. So let me know if you're having problems there. But I think we're in better shape than we have been, and I'm really happy about that. So Chris, I believe you. I'm sure you're an excellent cook. If we cannot agree on yesterday's history or last week, why are there so many interpretations? Because we can't agree. Interpretations arise because people look at things in different ways and perspectives, and that entire field of interpreting historical, I do not la Rasa, I don't know how to pronounce that, Lazon, but I mean, I'm assuming you're French based on your name and what you're talking about, but that sounds like an amazing cheese, and the French are known for their many cheeses. But global, basically, to answer your question, historical interpretation is all over the place, kind of like me right now, mainly because people can agree on different things, and that field of interpreting historical information and data in different ways based on different things that are happening is known as historiography, and it's the process of how do people write about history, what are their interpretations about history, what are their perspectives on history, where do they come from on history, and things like that. What's I don't know what that is, Elsar, but I'm glad you're here. So, global, at the end of the day, historiography is about how we interpret the past and how we establish a general school of thought about an event and what the event means and why it happened. Because history, at the end of the day, is really the study of the human condition and how humans do what they do and why they do what they do. And so, whenever you're learning about history, you're learning about the human condition. You're learning about what it means to be human, both good and bad. Would you say the Earth is about 6,000 years old? I mean, I'm not going to officially comment on that because there's a lot of people on this channel who believe that. I do think that the truth of the matter is that the science seems to say the Earth is a lot older than that. I'm not exactly sure 100%. I'm not a scientist. I wasn't there when it was made. I wasn't there when when it evolved or when it happened. I just I know that we're here, and I'm glad that we're here. And history is about 6,000 years old because that's when people really started to live in cities and write down things. So the Earth would have to be a little bit older than that because we have this whole era of what's called prehistory when people were surviving during the Mesolithic and Neolithic eras. So, I mean, I wouldn't say, even if there is some truth to the Earth not being ancient, billions of years old, 10,000 years. But if we look at evolutionary history, human beings really started developing into societies 10,000 years ago, and from there they didn't have written records that were actually transferable until the Mesopotamians in Sumer in about 4000 BC. So KDR, that's the best I can say. Nagy, that's the best I can say about that. KDR, do you connect history to bioprophecy? I connect history to all sorts of different things. So we talk about social studies, we talk about religion and the social sciences here on the channel. So yes, I look at those things, and I look at what religious texts say and how religions approach certain topics, past and present, and how religious predictions are made. And obviously a huge difference between Jewish and Christian religions, which obviously have had huge historical impacts and consequences, is the idea that biblical prophecy of what is called the Old Testament by the Christians, or the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh by the Jews, Christians believe predicted the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, and Jews do not believe that he is the Messiah, therefore they do not believe those things apply to him. So obviously there is a disconnect there. So obviously I'm connecting history to Bible prophecy there, but I try to do that for other religions. I'm a Westerner, and I have a Western frame set, which is very Judeo-Christian inspired, so obviously that's going to include a Jewish and Christian perspective, but I do my best to look at other religions and their prophecies and their understandings of the world, because that's what we do with history. If we're learning about the human condition, we're going to learn about human society, civilizations, and religions. So if you want to be a good historian, learn about religion, even if you don't believe in any of it. Elsar, do you believe in the Bible? I believe that there is a lot of, as a historian, what I can say is I believe there's a lot of history and a lot of important information in the Bible, and I believe that it has a power to change the world because the impact of the biblical narrative and the ethics in the Bible and the religions that have formed from the Bible. I mean, even Islam somewhat takes itself from the Bible. Is obviously huge. It's the most important monotheistic book ever. It's the religious text ever. It is the most well-selling book of all time, and it is the most printed book of all time. So obviously it means a lot, and will probably mean a lot for the rest of human existence, because I don't see Christianity and Judaism ceasing to exist. Abhinav, do I know about India's history? Yes, I know a lot about Indian history. I've been pleasured over the last couple of years to really learn more about India and its history and its experience, and it's just an amazing place with so much great history. Obviously, one thing that I really love is the Mughal Empire, the empire that built under Shah Jahan for his dead wife, the tomb that is the Taj Mahal, probably India's most famous symbol. So there's a little bit of Indian history for you, Abhinav. And I'm assuming you might be from India. We've got people who come in and are impressed to learn about India on this channel, and impressed that a Westerner actually knows a few things about India, its culture and religion. So, KDR, I don't know if that's true or not. That's obviously a perspective on the Old Testament and the book of Genesis, especially. Are you a Mormon? I don't disclose exactly which religion I am. I'm very tight-lipped about where I come, about my perspective, about where I come from. People don't know my name. My moderators, my wonderful moderators, don't know my name. Aberdan, did Jesus exist? That is not a religious question. That's a historical question. I'm glad you asked that because a lot of people believe it. He did not, and he certainly did. The historical evidence is extremely conclusive from secular, Jewish, and Christian sources that are all pretty reliable, especially based on their time period, that Jesus of Nazareth did certainly exist, and he claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. He also claimed to be God, and he was executed and eventually, supposedly, according to his disciples, rose from the dead. The rest, so that he lived, he taught, and he died. Those things are almost historically incontrovertible. The evidence for that is huge, just as much as the Titanic or something like that. But and ancient historical facts are much harder to verify, so it's much harder to verify that. But proportionally, it's like saying the Titanic sank. It's historically pretty incontrovertible that Jesus lived and that he died under Pontius Pilate through crucifixion. Miracles, the resurrection, coming again, being God, you can't necessarily historically prove those. You seem to be quite rich. Is it true? I mean, it's all proportional. Compared to like the Bill Gates and Elon Musks of the world, I'm not very rich. Compared to most millionaires, I'm not very rich. But I mean, compared to a large percentage of the world's population, unfortunately, that's starting to change as the global economy grows. I am wealthy. So, I mean, if you live in the United States and you're not in the poverty line, you're in the 99% of the entire world's economy. So, that's rich is a relative term. I guess I technically am. Yes, I went to college. I went to college and I have a master's, and the doctorate is next. So if you like learning about the history that this guy with a master's, who's technically a historian, is talking about, and you like the social studies and the humanities, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. So, why was Israel as a country only in 1948, and what prophecy was that? So, Israel becomes a country in 1940. I know that there's a lot of people who interpret the biblical prophecies from the book of Ezekiel in the context of Israel getting a national status, which doesn't make any sense because Ezekiel himself was talking about Israel without a nation when he wrote supposedly in the mid-6th century BC. And the reason I use BC and AD instead of BCE and CE is because BCE and CE, while much more inclusive, are still related to the birth of Jesus Christ when they transition from BCE to CE. So for me, it's relative and irrelevant that you have BCE and CE. And there was a prophecy that well, not a prophecy, but there is this idea that Israel in 1948, it becomes a nation because of a large resettlement of Jewish people who for the last 75 years before then have been relocating, especially from Eastern Europe and the Russian Empire, where they were heavily persecuted, to the land that was called Palestine, or the Holy Land at the time, that had originally been the nation of Israel in ancient times, the Roman province of Judea, where Jesus of Nazareth's ministry was, and where they had been expelled by the Romans in 136 because of a Bar Kokhba revolt. Their continual revolts against Roman authority forced the empire, or pressured the empire, to remove them, and they were exiled. And Hadrian, the Roman emperor at the time, changed their name from Israel to Palestine, and the capital from Jerusalem to Area Capitolina. And basically it became a Roman province, and Jews weren't supposed to be there. And over time they came back in slow but steady numbers. But there was a real re-entry of them starting in the late 19th century and into the 20th century, and after the Holocaust and after the atrocities of anti-Semitism in Europe. Basically it became understanding that the Jews of the world needed a place to stay and be themselves and had their own culture and society, and that area was the land of Palestine. And so so the British had originally acknowledged this earlier in the 20th century, and they had overseen that land following World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and they decided to divide the land between the Palestinians and the Arabs and the different people who were already living there and the Jews into a two-state solution that has never really worked, and that is why we have a war in Gaza now. And that's why history matters. That's why history has an impact, because what's happening now was caused by that, directly or indirectly. So history is a tapestry, and we're part of that tapestry. What do you know about the atrocities of the boarding schools for Native Americans and how they recently they found buried bones? I think in Canada, was it? Well, that'd be the first peoples, the Aboriginal peoples of Canada. I don't know a huge amount about the boarding schools. I know there was this forced indoctrination of Americanism and English and things like that, and the natives were forced to do that in huge amounts of pressure, but I don't know exactly what else the boarding schools would do. I'm imagining there would be corporal punishment and all sorts of other horrible things that were common in schools like that. But basically, if I'm correct, these were built on the reservations where the natives were forced to live under, and they were already in very harsh conditions where they were already treated with great discrimination and racism. So it would make a lot of sense that this was an unpleasant and horrible experience that would include corporal punishment and include a lot of discrimination and imperialism on land that they used to own that had been part of their tribes and was sacred to their tribes. I don't know, Eyes. That's a difficult question. You can donate chapstick. I actually don't have my chapstick on me today, and that's why my lips look as bad as they do. But thank you, Alma, and I'll take that as a nice thing. Yes, Christianity starts after Jesus' supposed resurrection, and it was originally a sect of Judaism that actually kind of branched off and became its own thing, especially after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD by the Roman general Titus, who later becomes the Roman emperor. And that was because Jews and Christians were praying at the temple, and the Christians were just simply saying that they had found their Messiah, while the Jews were arguing about whether there was a Messiah, and some of them believed he had not come, and some believed that there was a Messiah, but he certainly wasn't Jesus of Nazareth, because they believed that the Messiah, many of them, like the Zealots and the Pharisees, and these are actual groups that existed. They're not just New Testament fantasies. These groups actually believed that the Messiah would be a conquering Messiah who would overthrow the Roman government and bring them their ultimate liberty and bring back the Davidic kingdom of the 10th century BC. And that because Jesus did not necessarily seem to be doing that, and because he was a threat to religious authority, the Jewish leaders, on trumped-up charges, convicted him of blasphemy because he called himself God, and then brought him before Pilate, who, despite seeing him as potentially innocent, eventually gave in to their demands because of political pressure and had him crucified, the most humiliating and public death for the Romans. So it was so awful, crucifixion, that you're actually not supposed to ever say the words for the Romans. The Romans were never supposed to have the word crucifixion. It was a dirty word for them. And it comes from cruca, the cross, and the excruciating. It's that bad. So, yeah, Gog and Magog. I know what you're referring to. What will disclosing your name jeopardize for you? I don't disclose my name. I understand where you're coming from. I almost at once wanted to call myself at the start of this the Friendly Neighborhood Historian, but you guys are the Friendly Neighborhood Historians. If you like and subscribe, I'm building you guys up and the main reason I don't get into my personal information, I don't give out my actual name, Elsar, is there's a lot on the internet, and there's a lot of situations that are not the most pleasant. But at the same time, one of the reasons I don't give out my name is because I am the channel for which the history comes to you, or at least when you're here in this channel. I'm not the center of attention. This is not my name show. This is me giving history and providing it for you guys and things like that. So also that's why I don't do that. Fahad, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. There is a Roman god at Mithra who supposedly was born of a virgin and born on December 25th. But there are huge differences. There are stories like this, but you have different gods who appear at different times with different stories, and there's not a lot of parallel to Jesus of Nazareth. There are some here and there. Horus is another one, but they aren't necessarily, I've read about them, they aren't exactly an exact parallel in another society. There are some overlaps, which probably means there's a lot of thematic resemblances, but there's not exact parallel. So, okay. First Nations, yep. DR, I think we get it. I'm sorry. I appreciate you letting me know. Not understanding, some people think the Book of Mormon is another Bible, just another testament of Jesus Christ. Why do people think that all the time? Because the Mormon Church, founded by Joseph Smith in the early 19th century, is kind of an answer to the Christian revivals. It's another Christian denomination that springs out of this thing called the Second Great Awakening. And Smith basically believes all the Christians are wrong. And he is supposedly visited by God and Jesus, who tell him that all the religions are wrong, and eventually he is visited supposedly by an angel who used to be a general named Moroni, who shows him where the tablets are, and those tablets he transcribes, allegedly, again, I'm using all of these things because this is what Mormons say, into the Book of Mormon. Now, the Book of Mormon is premised on the idea that a group of Israelites fled from when the temple was destroyed in 586, which is an actual historical event. They supposedly fled to the New World and created a society called the Nephites. The Nephites were eventually destroyed by other native groups, but before they were destroyed, the plates were hid by a man named Moroni, who, as an angel, appeared to Joseph Smith and told him where to go. So they believe, so in the Book of Mormon, not only do those events happen, but before that, after Jesus dies and resurrects in Mormon theology, he goes to these group. There has been no historical evidence of them coming here. There has been no historical evidence. I've heard theories about Phoenicians somehow making it past the Straits of what they call the strait. They called it the Straits of Hercules. It's obviously the Straits of Gibraltar. Of Phoenicians supposedly coming to the New World. It would have been extremely hard for the Phoenicians with their primitive technology to do so. But even more far-fetched is this idea they didn't have barges. I mean, so the historical inaccuracies in the Book of Mormon, it seems like more like historical fiction in many, many ways. It's not been verified that there were Hebrew people living here 2,000 years before Columbus. So, yeah. So, Chris, the idea is that it's another story of Christianity, which hides some of the truths that Christianity lost after the persecution by the Romans. So, hi Joseph, you just got your shout out. Okay, DR, I believe that Jesus existed. I believe that he claimed certain things about himself. I'm not going to say anything more about what I believe about him or don't believe. What percentage of history is questionable? So global, I like the idea of absolutism. I think there's a decent amount in history that's absolute in the sense of facts are absolute. But the way we interpret and understand these events is where the subjectivity is, where the questions come from. So history itself is pretty. There's things we learn and updated things that give us more detail and things like that. So I would say there's a 60 to 75% of history is pretty solid, and obviously that's subject to change, or people have ideas and those things turn out to be not true. That's why I do historical myths here on the channel, and then they come up with a new idea, and that idea works. Or they have a new fact or a new idea about history, and new information comes out that reveals it was originally true or it was false, things like that. So those things, there's a little bit of lane there, but there's a lot more subjectivity with historiography, where we interpret historical events and decide what they're saying and why. So, yeah, there is. I would say Mormonism does have a cover up for colonialism. There's obviously a lot of racism in Mormonism's past that has been washed over by the church, but that is true. Does good sport? You're absolutely right. Does anti-Semitism start because people are angry of Jewish because they crucified Jesus? That's why. So anti-Semitism, and I'm realizing this more and more the more I study history. It hits different areas at different times, and Christian anti-Semitism is based ostensibly in the rejection of Jesus, and supposedly they blame him for the murder, not the Romans, who become the Italians. And look, you have the Roman Catholic Church, the major Christian entity in Europe during the Middle Ages, and so because that's the major Christian entity in Europe during the Middle Ages, you can't blame them or say they killed Jesus. Because they've replaced the Romans. The Roman Catholic Church has replaced the Roman Empire in many ways when it comes to authority and power. And so because of that, the Jews are blaming the Jews makes sense, because it was Jewish leaders who wanted to kill Jesus, but the Jewish people should never have been held culpable for that at all. It's an absolutely horrible thing, and the Jews were faced with being called Christ killers, and much, much worse treatment because they had killed Christ. Pogroms were an example of this, where the Eastern Europeans, particularly the Russians, got back at them for that by destroying their lands, abusing their women, taking advantage of them, destroying their businesses, and ruining their lives, basically, with little to no intervention from the from law enforcement and legal measures. So that was T-Love, a huge reason why Jews were treated so horribly in Europe was because they indeed did not accept Jesus Christ as their Messiah. Favorite part of the grocery store? The ice cream section. Wouldn't that mean people have intermarriage amongst themselves? Good sport, I'd say so. Yeah, he's okay. I love music. He'll be back maybe tomorrow or Sunday, but he let me know he's not coming. It's okay. Yeah, produce is great. I mean, you need produce, you need your vegetables and your fruits, but I mean, yeah. The Jews did. There was a ship of Jews. There were Jews who immigrated to the United States during the Nazi occupation, but with the U.S. Restraints and quota laws, it was really hard for immigrants to get into the United States during the 1930s and 40s. And there was a ship of Jews who were actually docked off of the harbor of New York, and President Roosevelt was under pressure from even his wife to allow them in, and he denied them access, and they were sent back to Germany. I do not know that because that is not true. Talk about the Dust Bowl. Great topic. So the Dust Bowl is confounds the issue of the Great Depression, making it much worse than it necessarily was going to be already. But basically, it was a series of droughts and famines that destroyed crops, dust storms, windstorms, all sorts of environmental damage and chaos, natural disasters, as well as just dry earth that caused famines all throughout the Midwest and the plains and the Southwest of the country. Basically, these disasters forced they forced people to relocate and move westward and to go in different directions in different areas. And so there's the idea of the Okies, the people from Oklahoma who their crops have been devastated, their way of life has been shot and destroyed. Some of the most famous pictures of the Great Depression, I mean, I'm trying to remember the name of the photographer who took them, but she was a female photographer, extraordinarily important photojournalist, and those photos depict what happened in the Dust Bowl and how people were suffering because of it. And so you already have, it's hard to find a job, it's hard to find this and that, but now it's hard to find crops, it's hard to find a livelihood if you're a farmer. So a lot of these people from Oklahoma, the Okies, and from other areas would flee to places like California where the Dust Bowl wasn't as prominent. So it's really a sad and difficult chapter in American history. Good sport, do you want to know about Ellis Island? The Statue of Liberty was built by the French. Gustave Eiffel, who helped construct the Eiffel Tower, was actually part of the building of the metal framework. But basically, the Statue of Liberty is indeed based on ancient Greek religion to some extent, as is the lady who holds the Columbia light in the Columbia movie pictures. So. Yep, it's only recently that humans have gotten the technology and the affluence global to be able to interbreed animals and use them for different means and be able to create purebreds who are absolutely pure in the way they're supposed to be. So, but needs to do after rest. And thank you. I love music for basically semi-moderating the chat. So I'm pinning what you said there. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. This is our live stream Q&A where you can ask me anything you'd like about history. So I don't think there are Christians that accept that harlotry has replaced the representation. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean. I heard also about a man in Alexandria that claimed that he was with Alexander the Great after 600 years after his death. Is that true? Well, he might have seen a ghost. Ghosts are definitely part of history, but obviously he wasn't alive. In fact, humans were bred to create new combinations in astrology with a clock to keep track. I don't know what you mean by that, Global. Good sport. I'm glad you're sharing your story. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad you're here. Kaz Kano, welcome from Japan. Great to see you. I love having people from all over the world. What time is it over there right now, Kaz? We have people from all over the world, from Finland and Sweden and India, and from one of my favorite channel members, Underboss. He is from Nigeria originally. We've got people who come in from Ethiopia and Liberia, and it's just always amazing to see people from all over the world. With inauguration approaching, were there any historical interesting inaugurations or fun facts? So T-Love, we've got the inauguration on Monday of President Donald Trump. I'll be doing a video about that, then a short video. I do long-form videos. I'll be doing one about MLK this Monday and a live stream lecture where I talk about his history and impact. But basically, it was long believed that President William Henry Harrison died because he contracted pneumonia because of a disease of a cold that he caught while insisting on giving the longest inauguration speech in U.S. history. The reason he gave the longest inauguration speech in 1841 was because he believed that he was. The rumor during the campaign was that at 68 he was too old to lead the American people. He was the oldest president elected up to that point, so he gave the longest speech to prove that he was still a robust, strong general like he had been in his youth. And the historical myth is that he caught pneumonia from that, and the pneumonia killed him eventually, only 1 month into the office. But it was actually infected water that was going into the White House from the Potomac, and he got cholera and died. So that's something interesting there. President Trump is deciding to move his inauguration into the rotunda of the Capitol building, which was because of the inclement weather, and that was done with Ronald Reagan 40 years ago in 1985. So Trump trying to start off his second term just like Reagan started off his second term, with a lot of political parallels between the two. The Statue of Liberty is not a man. You're from Alaska. Thank you for joining us. So you're 4:30 around there, I think. I did an entire video. I'm sorry my lips are a little bit chapped. I'm not here to be a supermodel. I'm here to talk about history. I did an entire video. I mean, I remember I did a video once and people were commenting on the lack of chapstick, and I hadn't had any in a couple of days, and that's why. I mean, it's dry season up here, and basically I used it and I made a video in response to that about the history of chapstick. So, go figure. You're from South Africa. Well, I'm so glad you're here. Nagi, I'm so glad you're here. So, anyways, and for once, what's your favorite, summer or cheese? I'll take summer. I love cheese. If I had to give up one, though, I'd give up cheese because summer is just so much fun. There's so much to do. Yep, and it's that time in Alaska. So you are at 4:30 now, right, Den? And I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. I did an entire Colin. That's not true. I did an entire video on chapstick, and it came from the use of Vaseline, thanks to the use of rubbers and things like that, materials, thanks to people like John D. Rockefeller, who was very involved in the use of rubbers to produce Vaseline-like products and other adhesives and remedies. But basically, chapstick became popular and common in the late 19th century, and finally became the first incorporated chapstick seller was in, I think, 1926. So, yeah. And if you like learning about a brief history about chapstick or any of the other things I'm talking about, consider liking and subscribing, because you are joining us on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, and hopefully my reception's better and everybody's enjoying what we're talking about so far. But if you have a question, topic, or comment you would like to ask, please drop them in the chat. I will happily respond to them whenever I can. That's what we do here. Consider following us on Patreon, our Substack, for more information and more exclusive historical comments and articles and all sorts of things. We're not just a talking platform. We are a writing platform where we do a bunch of different historical things and a bunch of different history. So we bring that to you. There's also Instagram and other social medias where we update some of our information there. And check out the daily short form and long form content and everything that we do there as well. And I'm not wearing my smoking jacket yet, but I will have that back in time in the next couple of days. I was supposed to put it on, but I was rushing out of the car before I got in here, and so I forgot to put it on. But that's a usual habit of mine, to have my smoking jacket and everything ready to go. So, Otter, it's great to see you. Long time. It's been a while since we've had Otter. Hack, I am not a Mormon. So, Otter is asking, on the subject of oligarchs, can you give interesting facts about the monopolies of Carnegie, Rockefeller, and etc.? Well, they went after Rockefeller, especially with Standard Oil, and eventually made that breakdown. Standard, by the way, the reason we don't hear about Standard Oil as much anymore is because it is now modern-day ExxonMobil. But John D. Rockefeller created the largest of the monopolies, and it was a trust. And a trust is a little different than a monopoly, because in a monopoly you have one company that owns all of the means of production relative to one good. So it's one company that sells apples. It's one company that produces railroads. It's one company that offers cellular phone service. But basically, Otter Poop. Otter, basically, the truth of the matter is Rockefeller built up a trust where you have a bunch of different corporations working together who are owned by the same person or group of people, and they produce everything that's involved in the production of a product. So in a trust, you might have one dairy company or a series of different dairy companies that are all owned by the same person who sell cottage cheese, regular cheese, milk, eggs, butter, and it's one company selling all of those, and you don't have any competition. That's a trust, because the product and all the ancillary products that are related to it are sold by a company or series of companies that are run by the same person or group of people. So it's in essence just more steps to the same thing, where a small or group of people or one person owns and oversees the production and all the production assets associated with that. So Rockefeller had a monopoly, or sorry, Carnegie had a monopoly on steel, U.S. steel. Rockefeller had a trust over the oil, where he was able to oversee not just the oil, but all the other products associated with oil production, and that made him the first billionaire in American history. So, so that's some interesting stuff there. Now Carnegie, an interesting thing about all of these men, Carnegie, Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, James Duke, these guys were obviously huge robber barons who made a huge amount of money and paid their workers very low wages. And obviously you have overcrowded factories, unsanitary spaces, usually populated by immigrant labor, which was really common in the late 19th century. These people who had to go work somewhere, so they went and worked for Carnegie or Rockefeller or these other guys, and they didn't make a lot of money, but it was enough for them to survive. As time went on, thanks to things like the assembly line and Henry Ford, who almost had a monopoly on the automobile industry, labor and wages went up because of innovations, and as it became easier to make these products, it became the demand for labor and the value of labor increased, so the wages for the labor increased as well. Of course, you also have the rise of collective bargaining. You have the American Federation of Labor, the Knights of Labor, they were originally known as by Samuel Gompers. You have labor unions and organizations that organize and do everything in their power to make sure to bring people like Carnegie and Rockefeller to the table and force them to pay up. Then you have the government's enforcement of antitrust and anti-monopoly legislation during the Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft and Woodrow Wilson administrations, which bring Rockefeller and Carnegie and the others to heel and force them to break up into different groups and different companies run by different people with competing interests. So that's a brief overview there, but all of these men, despite all of that, were extraordinarily philanthropists. Duke University is named after James G. Duke. Cornelius Vanderbilt, who as a robber baron created the first real monopoly over the railroad industry, he had the Vanderbilt University named after him. It was called Carnegie Hall before it was Radio City Music Hall, and Rockefeller was huge in the philanthropy that he gave to so many different people. Now, these men were very greedy, but a lot of their money was used to help others, either through giving them wages, producing goods that they needed or services they required, or for endowing the arts, sciences, universities, things like that, libraries. Carnegie basically believed, because he grew up illiterate in Scotland and was an immigrant, that if people could have the ability to read and access materials, then people would have the ability to be better people, to actually succeed the way that he had. And reading was what made the difference. So that's why he gave huge amounts of money to libraries and university libraries. So, Hackoli, have you heard of the message of St. Joseph Smith? I just talked about the message of Joseph Smith and what he was all about, and Joseph Smith was eventually killed by an angry mob who was tired of him philandering with their wives, and the Mormon Church wants to paint him out as though he was a martyr. He died with a gun in his hand, which martyrs don't normally do. Happy is asking a great question. Do you think the advancement of technology will help the betterment of mankind or not? Well, it's a spectrum of pure technology, like the Elon Musks of the world, and the more technology, the better. And the Luddites on the other end, which were a group of people who ran around the English countryside during the Industrial Revolution, destroying whatever factories and machinery they possibly could in the early 1800s. I think there's obviously technology is just reflective of what history is reflective of, and that's the human condition. Humans use this technology for incredible and amazing things to help each other and to uplift one another, and technology makes everything in life it can make anything in life easier because of that. But at the same time, it's also extraordinarily, it can be extraordinarily corrosive. I mean, all of the products created in the Industrial Revolution that made life easier, like the steamship and the engine and the railroad and of a car and the airplane, were used to create the tanks, artillery, and poison gases that devastated and killed millions during World War I. The technology that could produce nuclear power also produced, obviously, nuclear weapons that became the bane of human existence during the 20th century and were used twice, unfortunately, at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So technology is very neutral. It's the humans that have it that really make the change there. Dorothea Lange, yep, absolutely. I love music. So Dorothea Lange was the one who pictured the Dust Bowl, and that was what we were talking about. And she actually worked for the Farm Administration under Roosevelt. She was a government agent who showed the so many different pictures. Of course, the pensive woman, which is her like this, looking very, very worried, is extremely famous. There's another one of her with her children, but Dorothea Lange was the photographer during the Great Depression who took the most pictures of the Rose Bowl. So, everyone else, if you're interested in learning more about the Dust Bowl and actually visualizing it, look up Dorothea Lange. Thank you. I love music. We're who friends, Landon? Yeah, global. It's based off of money. But it's based off of being. What does money represent? Power and the ability to survive. And in some ways, and that's another spectrum. So how much power do you want versus how much survival do you want? So, Happy Viking. I've heard about that happening. I'm not sure how much that is. Lost. I don't know what you're talking about. That was the rumor, but there was also a rumor that he was basically, you could compare it to a lynching. I don't want to go that far. Lynching, by the way, was a practice brought over from England and Ireland that was applied and used by the Southerners against both blacks and whites. And then after the Civil War and the freedom of the slaves, it was used almost exclusively to terrorize blacks by the Ku Klux Klan and others. It's a despicable practice, but has been a part of human history for a long time. And in many ways, you could argue that the crucifixion was a lynching. It was a public execution of somebody who was deemed a criminal by the Romans. So, and usually the lynching victims were innocent, or at least not given due process. And you could argue that Jesus of Nazareth wasn't given due process depending on your religious beliefs. Christians basically have to believe that Jesus wasn't given due legal process, and if it had been a fair trial, he would have gone free. So, if they don't believe that, then they're not Christians. So, Ryan, I know that's confusing to walk into. Those of you who are just joining us, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, and we are talking about history, and I was answering a question about the death of Joseph Smith and how he was supposedly martyred by the Mormon Church, and that is a long-standing belief of them, and how he might have died. An angry mob was killing him, because we talk about humanities, we talk about social studies, we talk about religion here. So, Richard, where is the evidence of that? I've heard that many times, and if that was true, then Catholics and Muslims would have spent hundreds of years trying to kill each other in the Muslim century of conquest, which oversaw them taking over huge Christian areas that were probably Catholic, such as North Africa and Spain, and also, of course, the Crusades, where the Crusaders tried to do the same. They just weren't as good at fighting as the Muslims were. So, Richard, I would like some proof on that one. But I've heard that before. I've heard that the rosary beads that the Catholics use are actually based on, and Islamic prayer beads are the same thing, and they got it from the Catholics, because the Catholics came first. But I've never really bought that fully, so. If you're just joining us, the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, we're talking about the connections between Islam and Catholicism and how much they have in common. Muslims are the best. What do you mean by that? We're talking about the connections between Islam and Catholicism. So if you like learning about the history of world religions, and you like learning about history in general, or geopolitics, or the past, anything related to the past, consider liking and subscribing. You're in the right place. You're in the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So, and we are friendly and neighborly about how we treat each other, although that doesn't always come out in the chat. We've done a pretty good job today, even without our wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny, who we miss. Is there any documented pre-modern society that was atheistic? Pre-modern as in medieval and before? I mean, many of the Epicureans in Greek, many of the Greek philosophers were atheistic. And I think that there are a lot of people throughout history, especially history of the past. Oh, great. Freshly Wild's here. Great to see you. Thank you. All the way. So good to see you as always. But Hack, basically, there are There are people, I think, throughout history that were definitely atheistic or or because they knew that the mainstream culture was religious, they used it to get what they needed or wanted. So, as a society as a whole, I think there were people, I think there were groups of people. The Epicurean philosophers would be a good example. I can't think of one that was purely atheistic. My closest argument would be the different Buddhist cultures and societies in East Asia, but even those societies had religious practices. The Japanese believed their emperor was a god. The Chinese worshiped different spirits, ancient spirits. They have the mandate of heaven. So I think there is a common belief in human history that there is an afterlife, that there is some sort of divine being, and we just don't know who that is necessarily or can't agree on it. So, what date are you looking for? Like the first Satanist in recorded history? He was asking about the first history of a first atheistic society. I would say that the first atheistic society probably comes about in the or at least the atheism becomes more in vogue with the Enlightenment in the West. I don't think it really has gotten much traction in the East, but I think as a society becomes wealthier and more advanced technologically, and as that happens, you see a decline in birth rates, and you just see a decline in religious affiliation, where people either don't care about religion or don't believe in God at all. So, yeah. Okay, Yogi, I will not touch my face for the rest of the live stream if you subscribe. Yes, I believe religion is an artifact of the human experience, and I think it reflects the human experience and the culture all throughout, because you have different people experiencing different things and worshiping different gods, but you have this uniform idea amongst historians that there are religious, hold on. You have so hack, basically, yes, religion is an artifact of the human experience because you have humans throughout the world, just like they built pyramids, just like they built megaliths, just like they did all of these different things, finding ways to worship and believe in some sort of higher power, maybe many higher powers, maybe few. Monotheism is relatively new compared to polytheism. And you could argue that the Jews, if you read the Old Testament carefully, were, although being ostensibly monotheistic, struggled with the polytheism issue for quite some time. Richard Earle is saying that depends because the Romans saw Christianity as atheist. Yes, because they didn't have images of their God. And I mean, this has been applied to other religions. They also saw them as cannibals because they believed that Christians, thinking that the Eucharist, the bread and wine during communion, was the body and blood of Christ, or at least calling it that, they believed that they were cannibals as well as pagans, as well as atheists. So yes, and it was, obviously, you go from hundreds of gods to one God, and the Romans actually didn't mind the idea of Jesus being God. They didn't mind the idea of the Hebrew God of the Jews, because for them it was one more God, and adding a God was as easy as adding an emperor, especially that's what the Roman emperors did. So Richard, the truth of the matter is, the Romans didn't mind that. They just minded with the Christians that they didn't worship the emperor as God. So Richard, that's a very good point. Okay, Yogi, but that was good advice regardless, Yogi, so I will do that anyways. Harsh Patak is asking, what do you think what would happen if Protestant Christianity would not have existed? What would happen into society? I don't know exactly. I can't, it's hard to believe, especially as a Westerner, or to see the world as a Westerner before. I love doing the what ifs in history. I think there would have been continual Catholic claims. I think the Western Hemisphere would have been thoroughly Catholicized, if that's even a word. I don't think it is, but it is now, I guess, or I'm using it operatively by the time of the over the centuries, and who knows how monolithic Catholicism would have become. So, what do you mean by that, Yogi? That's an interesting point about the Egyptian gods. Are you asking about polytheism and mythology? Because we talked about the Egyptian gods even today. We talked about the similarities supposedly between Horus and Jesus. So. So, anyways, when you get a chance, Yogi, let me know what you're talking about. But anyways, if you're liking what you're learning about and you're liking the history that we talk about here, consider subscribing to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. And becoming a Friendly Neighborhood Historian is as easy as liking and subscribing. It's what we do here. It's what we do best here, and we really, really enjoy having you here. Ask a question, drop a comment, or a topic you would like to discuss related to history. So, it's what we do here. On the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, and I will have my smoking jacket, and I will have my microphone and my lighting hopefully tomorrow. I was talking a little bit about Christianity, yes, but whatever you'd like to ask about Rayon, that's what we're here for. So it seems like hopefully, how am I coming in? Is my quality good? Hopefully it's better now that I have Wi-Fi, but I don't know if I'm still buffering or anything like that. Hopefully it's not too bad. So let me know if it's okay. Are you familiar with the cargo cut in the South Pacific during World War II? Okay, good. Glad that it's holding on there. Not quite. I don't know exactly what that was. The cargo cult. No, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that because I don't know everything. And thanks to you guys, I learned about new topics like Unit 731, World War II. Didn't know about that. Cargo cult. It sounds oddly familiar. Something I'm studying recently is how a lot of southeastern countries got their independence not from the Americans or the Europeans, but initially from the Japanese. The Filipinos, the Vietnamese, the Indonesians all declared their independence at the end of World War II because they were fed up of being oppressed by the Japanese and wanted their own freedom from whichever country they wanted. The U.S. granted the Philippines their independence in 1947. Ho Chi Minh was a freedom fighter against the Japanese before he turned on the French and wanted independence from them. Same thing in Indonesia with Sukarno. These people wanted their independence because they had been suffering, because their empires had lost them to the Japanese, who were extremely oppressive during World War II. And they'd also had independence movements in there for a while anyways, because they didn't want to be controlled by people who didn't speak their language, believe in their gods, or think the way they did. So, Harsh Patak is asking why Genghis Khan. So Genghis is the better way to say his name, and Genghis Khan just means ruler. Khan means ruler. His real name was Temujin. He never invaded South Asia. The Mongols were defeated in three places. They were defeated in Lithuania. They were defeated by the Mamluks, the Egyptian Muslims Sultanate, and they were defeated by the Dai Viet in southeastern Asia. But that was after Genghis was dead. They tried to invade southern Asia, and that's the fourth place. The Indians were able to repel them. Eventually, the Mughal Empire was founded by a man named Babur, and Mughal is the Indian word for Mongol. So that is why, and Babur was a relative of Genghis Khan. I mean, a lot of people are because he had so many children and so many wives. But Babur was a closer relation in high ranking, as was a man named Tamerlane, which formed the Timurid Empire in Afghanistan in the 15th century. I don't know if you know that, but there was a large Muslim empire in Afghanistan for a long time. The problem I have is there is no historical evidence of the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob outside the Bible, Quran, Torah, other than Jesus Christ. Why is that? I acknowledge Jesus Christ existed. Well, yeah, I mean, historical evidence for a God is like scientific evidence for beauty. It's not, if God is an extra dimensional being that is all powerful, you're going to have historical evidences that are miraculous or mystical, especially if that God is all powerful. And so therefore you're going to have, those are the evidences for God just because they fit those boxes. But of course it's, do we believe that they're historically accurate things or not? So that's the case there, Casey. Can you talk about World War I and how the war went there against British and Germany? Well, I mean, I've done entire live stream lectures on World War I. I've done entire videos on World War I. I can give you a quick summation, Rayon, but basically the World War I was caused by a series of alliances between the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, and eventually the Ottoman Empire, and the Entente, which became the allies of Britain, France, Russia, and later the United States. And it was fought over Austria wanting to take over Serbia, Russia not wanting it to happen, and Germany and Austria teaming up against Russia, which was allied with France, who Germany invaded, and that's where trench warfare comes from. It comes from the German invasion of France during World War I. The British backed up France and the Russians. So there was a Western Front, there was an Eastern Front, there was fighting in Greece between the Greeks and the Ottoman Turks. The United States gets involved in 1917 because the Germans promised the Mexicans the southwestern territory of the United States if they attacked America. So, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. So the United States gets involved in the war and is able to help the French and British troops who are wary from years of trench warfare against the Germans, who are equally as wary. They're able to help them overwhelm the Germans and defeat them in November of 1918. Meanwhile, the Russian Empire collapses and a Bolshevik revolution takes place, and the first communist state is established, and they pull out of the war in late 1918, or in mid 1918. So Basically, World War One is the first modern war with or first fully modern war with huge amounts of modern technology. The tank, heavy artillery, airplane combat debuts. It's called dogfights. Baron von Reichfield, I think, other things like that that are just really, really difficult. So, and it obviously leads to huge environmental damage because of all the advanced technology. It leads to huge human losses. There's tens of millions of people who die all over the place. The war is extremely costly. The German Empire, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire collapse. The British and the French empires get even stronger because they're able to basically divide up the Middle East and oversee their operations after the Ottoman Empire collapses. The modern Middle Eastern states, Iraq, Iran, eventually Saudi Arabia, are formed at this time. So stuff like that happens. It's huge consequences, and the world was never the same before or after. We are approaching an hour, and usually an hour is where we cut off, but I want to go through as much of the chat as I can, answer everyone's questions, so I appreciate everyone for hanging on. I'm doing my absolute best to answer everything, and if you like what I just talked about and you like learning about history, you're in the right place. You know the drill, like and subscribe. Some of the old animals and monsters and old legends almost describe what we would call dinosaurs. Is it possible 100,000 years ago people encountered the very last stragglers from before? It's possible. I mean, technically, some of the animals, like the kimono dragon, is related to the dinosaurs. So, Richard, I think it's quite possible. Interesting. Oh, I did hear about this hack. Yes. Basically, it's almost like the monoliths from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I love to read, too, by the way. But the monolith is dropped, and if you've seen the movie or read the book, and the Bushmen and the Neanderthals basically gather around it and worship it, and it gives them knowledge to advance their evolutionary development even further, which is what the aliens are supposed to do in the book and the legend and the series. And it's basically this monolith is worshipped, and so yes, I have heard about that. I just heard about that, and that did in fact happen, and it just shows the power of persuasion, of technology. The same plane technology that debuted in World War I being used to airlift supplies, and people not understanding what it was there for. Chapstick does exist. I don't have any on me right now. We've been through this. Thank you so much. Rodolfo, so good to see you. Operation Northwoods. I'll have to look into that. Do you think Isaac Newton's time or era is smarter than modern day? I think that human beings have generally the same amount of intelligence. The ability to know things is different. The ability of knowledge is different, but I'm not any smarter than Aristotle. I just know more than Aristotle did, but Aristotle knew things I don't know. So there's an example of that. We have knowledge, but are we just as smart? No. Are we just as wise? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And yes, Angel, it's my pleasure to share my wisdom and my knowledge with all of you guys. I'm going to take one more question, our last call of the night, and then we are going to wrap it up. Again, like and subscribe, all that great stuff. And we'll be back tomorrow with more Q&As, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It wasn't a limited view of history, it was a specific view. There's a difference between a limited view that doesn't talk about things and a specific view that talks about a lot, but focuses on a particular group of people. I mean, in America, Americans learn American history. That's a specific view of history that can sometimes be limiting if you ignore other things. So if a history is taught right, it's never limited, even if it's very specific about a group of people like women or minorities or gay people or things like that. So it's a great question, Global. I'll take one more just because that one was so good. But yes, you're at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we talk everything history, social studies. So this is our live stream Q&A. If you missed out, I'm sorry. Consider joining us tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Will AI surpass humanity? I think humans created AI, so humans can pull the plug. Yeah, sorry about my dry lips. Sorry about all of that. Yes, I know. I will have chapstick available. Maybe I'll even start the channel by putting some on tomorrow just to appease all of you guys. But anyways, thank you very much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your night. And again, like, subscribe. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. I'm glad you guys found us. And I hope you have a wonderful Friday evening. And we'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern for part 2 of our live stream Q&A. Ask me anything, social studies, history, geopolitics, and humanities. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys later on. Take care.